Jai Gurudev. Today we are going to see the lesson from gathering to growing food. In the previous lesson, we learnt about how early men were hunters and gatherers. In this lesson, we would learn about the early men becoming farmers and herders and leading a more settled life. What will I learn in this lesson? Effects of the introduction of farming and herding, archaeological evidences of early crops, animals, houses, tools, pottery, burials, etc. Case study, the Northwest and the Northeast. The objectives of the lesson: appreciate the diversity of early domestication, identify the material culture generated by people in relatively stable settlements, understand strategies to analyze the above. Ninuo is a girl who hails from the northeastern part of India. You know about the northeastern states of India already. Assam and 7 more states are there which are called as sisters. But nowadays we refer to them as Ashtalakshmi of India. Now we are going to see about the food habits of Ninuo. Ninuo's lunch. Ninuo's favorite lunch is boiled rice, squash, pumpkins, beans and meat. Her grandmother grows the squash, pumpkin and beans in the little fruit and veg garden at the back of her house. The food was so different when we went on the picnic to Madhya Pradesh. I wonder why the food there was hotter and spicier than what grandma makes here for me. Ninuo thinks in this way. Do you think the food found everywhere is the same? If not, what are the reasons for the differences? Varieties of food. Today, most of our food, such as fruit, vegetables, grain, milk, and meat, comes from plants that are grown and animals that are reared. Different plants grow in different climates. Rice, for example, needs more water than wheat and barley do. This explains why some crops grow only in some areas. Different animals also prefer different environments. In dry, hilly environments, for example, sheep and goat can survive more easily than other cattle. So, basically, due to differences in climate in different places, people in different places ate different plants and animals. In the previous lesson, we saw that the early men were hunters and gatherers. They hunted food and also gathered fruits and seeds. But how did they learn farming and herding? The beginnings of farming and herding. The plants and animals that people used as food changed with changes in the climate of the world. People of that time must have seen those changes and they must have found places where edible plants were found and learnt how seeds broke off stalks, fell on the ground and new plants sprouted from them. Maybe they started caring for plants, protecting them from birds and animals so that they could grow and the seeds could ripen. This is how, over many years of watching and learning about the weather and plants and animals, hunter gatherer people became farmers. They could also catch and tame animals by leaving food for them. Women, men, and children could also catch and then tame animals by leaving food for them. Try thinking of the reasons why the first animal to be tamed was the wolf, the ancient wild relative of the dog. Luckily for us, most animals we use, such as sheep, goat, cattle, and also the pig, live in herds. They are gentle and eat grass, and grass is easy to grow. So, people fed, bred, and protected these animals. And this is how people became herders, that is, cattle keepers. Herders means the people who rear animals. Domestication, that is, taming animals. Almost all the land in ancient earth was covered in forests. So, most plants and animals were originally wild in nature. But as humans became more powerful, they started keeping some wild plants and animals, such as the wolf. Over many years and generations, these plants and animals changed. They became used to eating and living with humans, and we say that they were domesticated or changed and adapted to live better with and around humans. This explains the difference between the teeth of wolves and dogs. What should be the difference? Just think. People select these plants that are strong and useful. They also select plants that give large sized grain or fruit and have strong stalks that can take their weight. Seeds from such good plants are collected and soon to get the same good qualities in more new plants. Amongst animals, those that are more gentle are selected for breeding. The slow and gradual process of domestication took place in many parts of the world. It began about 12,000 years ago, and almost all the plant and animal food that we use as food today are results of domestication. Some of the earliest plants to be domesticated were wheat and barley, and the earliest domesticated animals include sheep and goat. When men started farming and herding, definitely their life would have been a changed one, because when they were hunters and gatherers, they had to run behind the animals and wander from here and there to collect fruits and roots. But when they became farmers and herders, they started leading a more settled life. So, it's a new beginning in the history of human beings. A new way of life from hunting gathering to farming. If you plant a seed, you know it takes some time to grow. It could be days, weeks, months, or in some cases, years. When people began growing plants, it meant that They had to stay in the same place for a long time to look after their plants, watering, weeding, driving away animals and birds till the grain ripened. And then the grain had to be used carefully. Grain could be stored for months for both food and seed, but people had to think of ways of storing it. In many areas, they began making large clay pots or wove baskets or dug pits into the ground. The people before these early farmers, the hunter gatherers, did not need to make pots because they did not store what they hunted or collected. It was all usually eaten up within days. This is how historians know that the earliest clay pots they find were used by the earliest settled farmers. Storing animals sounds different. We have generally heard about storing food grains, but what is meant by storing animals? Seed and dry fruits can be kept or stored for months or years, but storing animals is a different thing altogether. First of all, animals multiply naturally. Besides, if they are looked after carefully, they give milk, wool, and eggs, which are all important sources of food. In other words, animals that are reared can be used as a continuous supply or store of food. If you think about it, you will realize how many wonderful things and services we get from so many different animals. So, that is the meaning of storing animals. Finding out about the first farmers and animal herders. Archaeologists have found evidence of early farmers and herders all over the subcontinent. Subcontinent in the sense Indian subcontinent. Some of the most important ones of them are in the northwest in present day Kashmir and in east and south India. To find out whether these sites were settlements or farmers and herders, scientists study evidence of remains of plants and bones of dead animals. One of the most exciting finds includes remains of burnt grain. Scientists have identified these grains and they can tell us that many crops were grown in different parts of the Indian subcontinent. Settling down. Archaeologists have found remains of the earliest huts and houses. In Burzahom, in today's Kashmir, people built pit houses which were dug into the ground and had stairs leading into them. You would have seen underground parking nowadays, same sort of it. People could have lived in the underground rooms because they protect from rain and cold, and they could have also used them to store food and other things. So, the pit houses were used by the people to protect themselves from the severity of cold or different climatic conditions, and also to store food and other things. This was the start of a settled way of life, and all people in all the cities and villages follow that lifestyle even today. Archaeologists have also found cooking hearths both inside and outside the huts, which suggests that depending on the weather and on the number of guests they might have invited, people cook both food both indoors and outdoors. Stone tools have also been found from many such sites where they were houses, and many of these stone tools are different from the earlier Paleolithic tools, the old Stone Age tools. That's why they are called Neolithic. Neo means new, lithic means stone, new Stone Age. Stone Age can be divided into three ages: Paleolithic, Mesolithic, and Neolithic. Paleolithic means Old Stone Age, Neolithic means New Stone Age, and Mesolithic is the period between the Old Stone Age and the New Stone Age. These were tools that were polished to give a fine cutting edge, and mortars and pestles were used for grinding grain and other plant produce. And mortars and pestles are used for grinding grain even today, so many thousand years later. Maybe some small modifications would have been there, but still we are using mortars and pestles. In the villages you could see them in common. We don't use mortars and pestles after the invention of electrical grinders, but the people of the village, they are still using mortars and pestles. Mortars and pestles were very common even before 30-40 years. Many kinds of earthen pots have also been found. These were sometimes decorated and were used for storing things. People began using pots to cook food, especially grains like rice, wheat, and lentils that had become an important part of their diet. At the same time, tools of the Paleolithic, that is the Old Stone Age types, continued to be made and used. And remember, some tools were also made of bone. We have already seen about that. Besides, they began weaving cloth using different kinds of materials, for example, cotton that they had learnt to grow. Naturally, everything didn't change everywhere all at the same time. Not quite. In many areas, people still continued to hunt and gather food, and elsewhere, people slowly over many years adopted farming and herding. In many cases, people tried to mix these activities, doing different things in different seasons before finally becoming farmers and settling down. Other customs and practices. Many of the earliest farmers and herders lived in groups called tribes. In tribes, usually 2 to 3 generations lived together in small settlements or villages. Most families are related to one another, and groups of such families together make the tribe. There are many tribes all over the world even today. Members of a tribe do work such as hunting, gathering, farming, herding, and fishing. Usually, women do most of the agricultural work, including preparing the ground, sowing seeds, looking after the growing plants, and harvesting grain. Children often look after plants, driving away animals and birds that might eat them. Women also thresh, husk, and grind grain. Men usually led large herds of animals in search of pasture, and children often look after small flocks. The cleaning of animals and milking is done by men and women. Both women and men make pots, baskets, tools, and huts. They also take part in singing, dancing, and decorating their huts. Some men are regarded as leaders. They may be old and experienced, or young, brave warriors or priests. Old women are also respected for their wisdom and experience. Tribes have rich and unique cultural traditions, including their own language, music, stories, and paintings. They also have their own gods and goddesses. Tribes are different from many other societies because they consider land, forests, grasslands, and water as the commonwealth of the entire tribe, and everybody shares and uses them together. So there are no sharp differences between the rich and the poor. Living and dying in Mehrgarh. The site of the ancient village of Mehrgarh in the northwest of the Indian subcontinent is located in a fertile plain near the Bolan Pass, one of the most important routes into Iran. Mehrgarh was probably one of the places where women and men learned to grow barley and wheat and rear sheep and goats for first time in this area. And Mehrgarh is one of the earliest villages that we know about. Archaeologists who excavated this site found evidence of many kinds of animal bones from the earliest, bottommost levels. These included bones of wild animals such as the deer and pig. In later or higher levels and in still later levels, cattle bones are most common, suggesting that this was the animal that was generally kept by the people after they had started settling down. Other finds at Mehrgarh include remains of square or rectangular houses. Each house had 4 or more compartments, some of which may have been used for storage of seasonal plants and animal produce. When people die, their relatives and friends generally pay respect to them. People looked after them, perhaps in the belief that there is some life after death, and funerals and burials or such arrangements. So the people believed in life after death. Several burial sites have been found at Mehrgarh, and in one case, the dead person was buried with goats, which were probably meant to serve as food for the dead person who will go on to the next world. When archaeologists are digging at an excavation site, they know which level is older and which is newer. Suppose people first start living on flat land, layer 4. Over the years, the land will slowly rise because people throw around their waste materials and they generally stay and rebuild houses in the same place. This was found from level 1, so it must be older than the other one. The archaeologist thinks in this way. After hundreds of years, the area becomes like a mound. So when this mound is dug up, what is found from the upper layers is generally from a later time than what is found from the lower layers of the mound, which are older. These upper and lower layers are often referred to as levels, and level 3 and level 4 are older than levels 1 and 2. So which is the newest one or a very young one? It's level 1, and level 2 is older than level 1. Level 3 is older than level 1 and 2, and level 4 is the oldest level, which is older than level 1, 2 and 3. Here comes the summary of the key concepts you have learnt so far. Go through the points slowly and understand them without any doubts. Davojali Hadding sounds different, but it is an archaeological site. The archaeological site of Davojali Hadding is in the hills near the Brahmaputra Valley on routes leading to China and Myanmar, the northeastern part of India. Experts have found many things here. For example, they found stone tools such as mortars and pestles, tools made from fossil woods, a very old wood that has hardened into stone, pottery and jadeite, a type of rare stone. Now it's time to test your understanding of the lesson. Take up the quiz, answer the 15 questions I have given you, right? Dateline. About 12,000 years ago, humans started domesticating animals. Some interesting facts. Did you know? Apples float on water. Fresh apples float on water because 25% of their volume is nothing but air. Large melon. The name pumpkin originated from pepon, the Greek word for large melon. No sweat. Pigs don't sweat as they have no sweat glands. That's why they roll in mud to keep their bodies cool. First sense in dogs. A puppy is born blind, deaf, and toothless. The first sense it develops is that of touch, as its entire body, including the paws, is covered with touch sensitive nerve endings. First cultivated fruit. Fruit farming began sometime between 6000 and 3000 BCE. Figs were one of the first cultivated fruit crops. Now we have come to the end of the lesson. You have learned few wonderful concepts. You have known about some beautiful facts, and now it's time for activities. So ready to do activities? Go through the activities I've given you and try to do them. You have refreshed your minds with the help of the activities. Now it's time for you to think and answer the questions. Food for thought. Come on, children, you think and give the answers for the following questions.